In 2020, pregnant Nicole McGregor disappeared from Leamington Spa. Her frantic boyfriend Chris searched for her, helped by a new friend. He had no idea that his friend was stone cold killer Anthony Russell.
Chris saw a newspaper and realised that Anthony was the person that the police were looking for in connection with the 2 murders in Coventry.
The last person to see Nicole alive was wanted for the brutal murders of Julie Williams and her son, David. And now Anthony Russell had killed a 3rd victim.
He was saying things to Nicole's boyfriend like, oh, he must be really looking forward to becoming a father. He knew that Nicole was dead.
Anthony Russell went on the run, sparking a huge manhunt.
This wasn't an act of madness, this was calculated. And that calculation had cost 3 people their lives.
Russell murdered 3 innocent people and destroyed the lives of those left behind.
Daniel didn't want to live without his mum or without his brother.
His week-long murderous rampage left a trail of death and destruction, making Twisted Anthony Russell one of the world's most evil killers. The search for 39-year-old Anthony Russell was one of the largest in West Midlands police history.
We launched a huge manhunt. I think we had 200 officers that were working on it. We've got a responsibility to protect the public. That's our #1 responsibility. And you've got someone who's already been prepared to kill who's on the loose.
The police put in the papers a photograph of him, and it come on the radio every half hour. This man is dangerous, do not approach him. So the police already knew what he'd done, and they were frightened for the public.
Over the course of a week, Anthony Russell killed 3 people. This was a murderer without mercy.
This wasn't just enough violence to kill somebody. This is what we call overkill. So that's way more violence than is needed to kill that person.
The carnage that Anthony Russell left behind will stay with his victims' loved ones forever.
You never expect something like that ever to happen to your family, ever. You might watch on the television, read about it in a book, but to actually have it happen to you absolutely ripped our families apart.
This killer's story begins in the West Midlands city of Coventry.
Anthony was born on the 16th of April 1982. He'd got a number of siblings. He had a difficult childhood and he grew up mainly in care. He used to regularly go missing when he was in care, and he was often difficult to find. So he would be reported missing on a regular basis, and it would take quite a long time to find him.
As he entered adulthood, bad behaviour became criminal behaviour.
Anthony Russell had a track record of low-level crime. Theft, burglary, possessing weapons.
There was a bit of violence in there. I think he was convicted of a robbery, crimes that are often associated with people that have, substance issues.
It's pretty clear that Anthony Russell had a very big heroin addiction.
In 2020, Russell was 38 years old and living in a flat in Riley Square in the Bell Green area of Coventry.
It was a 1960s development. It's sort of a precinct-type design. It was built in a quadrant, so you have shops all around the bottom of the quadrant, and then I think there's about 4 or 5 stories above that, which contains flats. So a very sort of urban area with local shops. So it was quite a close-knit community.
On that same estate, living in a 1-bedroom flat, was 58-year-old Julie Williams. Widowed young, she'd raised her sons alone.
Julie was my brother's partner, the love of my brother's life. My brother unfortunately passed away when he was 39.
Julie and her eldest son, David, shared a close bond.
David is my nephew. David didn't have long with my brother, which was a great shame because his dad absolutely adored him and his brother Daniel. He absolutely adored his mum. They lived together and they went out together. He lived for his mum. He was very family orientated. He had lots of cousins that he got on with everywhere. Everybody absolutely loved him because he was such a happy chappie.
On Wednesday, the 21st of October 2020, 32-year-old David did not come home as planned. 3 days later, Julie still hadn't managed to get in touch with David.
My daughter phoned me up and she said there's something on the internet. She says that Julie's looking for David. She put out on the local radio, has anybody seen David? But we just thought, oh, he's crashed out at one of his friends' houses, and he'll be back in touch.
First came to the attention of police on Saturday, the 24th of October 2020, and that was a report made by Julie to say that her son David had gone missing.
Police will always do a kind of a victimology when they get a missing person report, and that will be largely around vulnerabilities and how unusual it was for this person to go missing.
His daily routine involved him being in the local area and associating with friends and spending time with his mother. So it was really unusual for him not to be in contact with her or to come back home. We have a dedicated team that deal with missing persons. Inquiries were started to be made around house-to-house inquiries, looking at CCTV to see when they could see his last sighting.
West Midlands Police identified David as a man struggling with addiction.
He didn't want to do drugs, but all those around him were. And unfortunately, David got into that way of living, which changed him as a person. And I think that's why his mum always kept an eye out for him all the time.
He'd been using drugs, it seems, for some considerable time. And all his connections were in the world of people who had similar addictions.
We knew he regularly visited the chemist for medication, so they started to look at see when the last time it was that he picked up his medication, do work around his phone to see when that was last active.
The police obtained David's phone records. Amongst the people that he called friends, there were some that worried his mother.
She mentioned one person that she was concerned that he owed some money for drugs, and she'd also received a text from David that said he was potentially having to get out of the area because he owed money for drugs. I think she thought that was unusual because David could often owe money for drugs, but that wouldn't cause him to go missing.
The circumstances surrounding David's disappearance were unclear. Police kept an open mind about what may have happened. But on the afternoon of Sunday, October the 25th, just 24 hours after Julie Williams reported David missing, there was an unbelievable twist in the investigation.
Julie herself is reported missing by one of her sisters.
Julie kept in touch with her sisters and her brothers every single day. So when she wasn't around, that's why her sister then reported it to the police, because she knew that that was out of character.
Once we'd done all the background checks into the fact that David was missing, then it became a real concern. So at this point, they went to Julie and David's address, and they couldn't get a response there.
The police, at 11 o'clock that Sunday evening, break into Julie's flat, and they find her dead.
The scene that met them was one of carnage. In the centre lay Julie's bloodied body.
Julie had been subject to this episode of prolonged beating, essentially, punching and blunt force injury.
Julie had an enormous number of injuries, something like 113 injuries to her body. So that suggests a rage-fueled attack.
The final act which caused her death was the application of a ligature. The ligature which was used in Julie's case was an electric flex from an electric fan.
The case was allocated to the homicide team, with Detective Inspector Jim Mahon put in charge.
I am the senior investigating officer, which means that I am the lead investigator for any serious crime. I went there in the middle of the night. It's dark, it's gloomy. So just even the inquiries around just trying to establish who was going in and out at the time was going to be really, really challenging.
Julie's family woke to the news of her murder.
We heard about Julie, and that was from the papers telling us that they'd found a woman's body. It was so final, it was so traumatic, it was so evil, frightening that somebody could do that to another human being. And straight away then, I think that's when we felt something bad's happened to David.
We obviously then had immediate concerns about the welfare of David because he was still a missing person, but now Julie had been killed. So it just really ramped up in terms of, one, trying to identify who the killer was, and secondly, to try and find where David was.
There were many questions and no answers to what may have happened. Investigators needed to find David Williams fast. On the 26th of October 2020, the investigation into the murder of 58-year-old Julie Williams in Coventry had just begun.
At this point, we're in the evidence-gathering stage. There was some blood and what looked like a fingerprint in blood on the radiator. There was only a bedroom and a living room in the flat. David would sleep on a bed in the living room, and Julie would sleep in her bedroom and watch telly there. Julie was dead on the floor in the room that David occupied. Her telly was still on in the bedroom. The neighbours had heard someone approach Julie's flat the night before, but they couldn't really hear what was being said. The person that had killed Julie had taken the keys and had locked the door behind them, so was probably known to Julie for her to have let him into the house.
For the family, not only the horror of Julie's death, the worry of David's whereabouts, but also the rumours surrounding the murder.
People were saying, David's done that, he's gone disappearing and David's gone and killed his mother. And I said, no, he wouldn't do that. He loves her too much. He definitely wouldn't do that. And he hasn't got a bad bone in his body.
We didn't have a suspect at all. The main focus then was on this fingerprint in blood. Now, that might have been Julie's fingerprint, but if it wasn't, then it's most likely to be the killer. That became the sort of priority submission, to take a photo and then see if we can match it to the fingerprint database, to somebody on it.
Whilst the forensic investigations were underway, the search for David intensified. Accessing his phone records provided police with vital information.
When we examined David's phone, we saw that he was in regular contact, quite a lot of contact with an individual that when we checked him out on our police systems was known to supply Class A drugs. That phone activity dropped off at the point where David had been reported missing, so there was an assumption there that that person knew that David was no longer going to be using his phone. On the Sunday night, we had that individual identified, located and arrested and brought into custody, and he protested his innocence straight away and provided an alibi.
Part of David's routine included regular visits to the Riley Square pharmacy, where he collected his methadone prescription.
What we found out as our inquiries went through on the Monday was that David had been seen going in and out of the chemist with an individual called Anthony Russell. They were both drug users, they lived near each other, they used to beg in the area for money, so we were quite keen to trace Anthony. He was the last person, other than Julie, that had seen David alive.
5 days after David Williams had been reported missing, police had a name: 38-year-old local man, Anthony Russell.
We realised that he was a close associate of David and he lived in the area. He would hang around Raleigh Square or around the local supermarkets that surrounded the area and would beg for money with other people in that community. And then once they'd got enough money, they tended to head towards each other's flats and use drugs.
He was a well-known figure in the area and one with a reputation for trouble.
He was unhinged. He wasn't normal. You know, his behaviour wasn't normal. But people were always frightened of him, so he got moved on, but nobody ever did anything about it. He used to go up to the hospital and annoy them. My daughter works at the hospital, and she said that the security had had to move him on several times.
We tried to locate him. We went to his flat, couldn't get any response from the flat. We forced entry into his flat to try and search for Anthony and David.
Anthony Russell's sparsely furnished flat was spattered with blood. A brief search uncovered the source.
On that Monday evening, we found David's body hidden underneath Anthony's bed. What was evident was that he'd been quite savagely beaten, so there'd been quite a lot of brute force used on David.
Either those injuries were defensive and came as a result of a full-out fight with his attacker, or again, they could have been about the rage that the attacker was feeling.
My daughter phoned me up and she was screaming down the phone at me. She says, "They found David." We was devastated. I couldn't eat or sleep. And every time I closed my eyes, I kept thinking about what David must have gone through. He must have been so scared because he probably wouldn't have believed it. You know, if somebody went to attack him, he'd probably just laugh thinking it's a joke. He wouldn't have realised until it was too late.
David's death meant the police faced an entirely different investigation.
It had gone from a missing person on Saturday, a murder and a missing person on Sunday. We've now got 2 murders. This now is where the investigation really ramped up. David had suffered from 81 external injuries, some including a knife, so he'd been stabbed. He'd got some severe wounds and bangs to his head.
Also, there was a lanyard around his neck which was causing neck compression, which would be very similar to Julie.
The lanyard ordinarily held David's keys, but they were not with his body. Detectives believed his and his mother's deaths were linked.
The fact that I could see similarities between Julie's body and David's body supported the notion that it was likely to be just one person, and I could see that the changes in which were present in David's body would suggest that he was in fact the first victim, with Julie following on afterwards.
We've got 2 crime scenes that we're working through all the phone evidence, working through who were the last people to see everyone alive and understanding their background. But the main priority is we've got someone who's killed 2 people on the loose and is a real danger to the public.
The double murder investigation was codenamed Operation Inshore, and detectives had one person at the top of their list: Anthony Russell.
Anthony Russell is a person of considerable interest in the killing of David and Julie Williams.
When we spoke to his family, we found that he had left the area, but he never had a phone. He never had his own mobile phone, so we had no way of tracking his phone or understanding who he was in contact with, and he just disappeared from Coventry. So we'd got a big manhunt on the go, but we had no idea where he was at this point.
With a suspected double murderer at large, every precaution had to be taken. The alert on Russell was put out nationwide.
They put it on the internet and in the Coventry Evening Telegraph. They were showing you photos of this Anthony Russell, saying do not approach him, he's very, very dangerous.
We were getting sightings all over the country, and we couldn't ignore these sightings because we had no way to confirm whether that sighting was correct or not. So we had to link in with all the different police forces to try and do those inquiries.
He didn't have a vehicle of his own, so they weren't using the usual ANPR tracking, that kind of thing. But they would have been looking at all public transport.
What we did find as we moved through the tracking on the CCTV, so we'd got some points where people who knew him had last seen him. He'd certainly been to a supermarket, which allowed us then to track him from the supermarket, which captured him getting on a bus. Now this bus then, we were able to track him going into Coventry city centre, but then we lost him within the sort of bus station area, which wasn't covered by CCTV. So we assumed he'd gone into the city centre to then travel onwards, but we had no idea where he would have gone.
Anthony Russell had been running away since childhood. By 2020, he was a man skilled in staying under the radar.
Anthony Russell took it upon himself to adopt various disguises. He was a man who hadn't lost his senses. He was extremely aware that he was the focus of interest by the police.
All the CCTV, when you put together each still of what he looked like, he was changing his appearance all the time. He was stealing glasses. He'd wear different hats, he'd wear hoods. His clothing was changed quite regularly.
Russell was as organised as he was brutal. On Monday, 26th of October, just hours since Julie's body was discovered and David still lay dead in his flat, Anthony Russell was already thinking ahead.
He needed cash and he needed a phone.
He attacks a 78-year-old man stealing his mobile phone. He goes to Kenilworth, where, believe it or not, Russell attacks a 71-year-old woman and steals £200. He drags the poor lady along the ground, injuring her. Once again, the act of a man who has absolutely no concern for anyone but himself.
Anybody coming into this man's path at this time is in danger.
On the run from the police, wanted for 2 murders, Anthony Russell was a desperate man with nothing to lose, and his murderous rampage was far from over. By the 27th of October 2020, Coventry double murder suspect Anthony Russell had been on the run for 2 days. 12 miles away, in the town of Leamington Spa, Warwickshire police received a missing person alert.
A man reported that his girlfriend had gone missing. They were begging in Leamington Spa. They had a different spot in the town where they would beg, and when he went to see where she was, when they finished begging, she'd just gone. He made that report on the Tuesday, so Warwickshire police started a missing person inquiry into a girl called Nicole.
Nicole McGregor at this point is 5 months pregnant and extremely proud of it.
She got a boyfriend called Chris. They lived in a flat in Leamington. They were both drug users, but they were trying to get off drugs.
Nicole had not been seen since the previous day, when she'd spent the morning with her partner and a new friend. By Tuesday afternoon, Chris was frantic with worry.
Chris wasn't the sort of person really to interact with the police. I don't think he was particularly fond of the police, but he got so worried by that evening that he actually approached the uniformed police officer and said, I'm really concerned that my girlfriend's missing. When the police started to get the information from Chris, he started to disclose that the day before they'd befriended a person called Anthony. He was from Coventry. It was at that point when the realisation came in that this might be Anthony Russell.
That same evening, the investigation into the double murder of Julie and David got a result. The blooded fingerprint from Julie's flat found a match on the national database. It belonged to Anthony Russell.
The fingerprint was the confirmation that Anthony was the suspect that we were looking for.
The chilling revelation that Nicole McGregor had been in the company of a man suspected of murdering 2 people in cold blood was one police took very seriously. They knew that time was of the essence.
We scoured Leamington for CCTV and seized all the CCTV of the town centre. We were able then, with the information from Chris, to piece together where Nicole was.
Then the story, dark although it already is, gets even darker because for some reason known only really to Anthony Russell, he targets Nicole McGregor.
What we saw was that Anthony Russell had approached her, he'd been begging over the other side of the road, and they'd walked away together.
Anthony Russell invites Nicole McGregor to join him in a place called Newbold Common, a wooded area in Leamington Spa. Quite quiet, quite secluded. It was suggested that she'd taken up the invitation because she thought that he could supply more drugs.
CCTV showed Nicole and Anthony Russell entering the woods together. 40 minutes later, Russell emerged alone.
That gave us then the last sighting of Nicole McGregor, and we were able to go through the woodland in the area where he could have got to on foot in that 40-minute period.
The CCTV cameras captured Russell walking the short journey back to the town centre.
He goes to seek out Nicole's boyfriend, the father of her unborn child.
What we were able to do then was track Anthony Russell, and what we found was that he spent the Tuesday with Chris, Nicole's boyfriend, going round Leamington looking for her.
He was like sympathetic to him, and he was inserting himself into an investigation as a good guy. He was saying things to Nicole's boyfriend like, oh, you must be really looking forward to becoming a father.
On the 29th of October, 3 days after Nicole was last seen, police searched Newbold Common.
We knew Anthony had already killed 2 people. We've got a girl going missing with Anthony. So, our biggest fear was that she was dead. On the Thursday, there was a specialist police teams that are trained to search wooded, difficult areas, do a methodical search to make sure that they search every area and they take it piece by piece. Storm Barbara was hitting the UK. The river was riding quite high, so the terrain was really, really difficult. Her body was found in some bushes and she had been strangled with her own leggings.
I received another phone call from the police to inform me that they had found another victim. And this victim was Nicole McGregor. Nicole's body was found with her face down, and what I could see was that there was vegetation within Nicole's mouth, which is likely to have been when she was face down on the floor, but alive.
The sheer terror that she must have felt when she was being attacked by this man she thought she trusted.
The position in which she was found was very suggestive that she was likely to have been the subject of a sexual assault as well.
Both Nicole and the baby she'd looked forward to bringing into the world were dead.
It can be a very sobering experience when you perform a post-mortem examination on an expectant mother. When you find the unborn child lying peacefully inside the mum's womb. This woman who was excited about the prospect of being a mum has had that taken away from her.
The death of Nicole McGregor meant police suspected Anthony Russell of killing 3 innocent people in a period of less than a week. Their biggest concern was what he would do next.
Russell is becoming more and more dangerous. So he's committed murders. He then is attacking people, taking their money, taking their phones. But again, there's a kind of a logical reason for doing that, even if the methods are brutal and awful. But now he's escalated to killing for the sake of it because it pleases him. So at the end of this 7 days, he's about as dangerous as he can possibly get.
Once again, Russell went on the run. A wanted man, he was prepared to do whatever it took to make his escape.
He'd left Leamington, he'd walked away on foot. We saw that on CCTV and lost the tracking of him as he disappeared. We then found that there'd been a robbery just outside Leamington. An old man called Roy, he'd had a brick smashed over the top of his head.
The attacker was a man with a plan, a man without mercy.
He steals the car. He leaves the 78-year-old with a fractured skull in his own front door, takes the car and leaves.
He only survived because there were some people that were doing gardening that had turned up to help with his garden that actually found him there and were able to get paramedics there and do first aid to keep him alive.
Police suspected the attacker was Anthony Russell, a fugitive hell-bent at getting away, no matter what the cost.
Russell is what I would call on a spree. One emotional event. He's not coming down. He's gone up into that rage when he's killed the first person, and he kind of stayed there. Spree killers don't stop until they're stopped.
Preventing Russell from killing again was the police's #1 priority.
We're working closely with Warwickshire Police to locate Anthony Russell as soon as possible. But I'd appeal to the public, if they've got any information as to where he might be, if they see him at all, make sure that they call us on 999.
They put out alerts on the red Ford C-Max he'd stolen.
It was picked up on some ANPR cameras and it had headed towards the Staffordshire police area, but it had pretty much disappeared into the countryside and it hadn't been hitting any ANPR cameras from that point.
In October 2020, there was a large police presence in rural Staffordshire due to a recent spike in theft there. In the early hours of the 30th of October, one of the patrol cars made an unexpected find.
They came across the vehicle, and when they did the check on the vehicle, they realised that it had been stolen in a violent robbery. It might have been linked to our murder suspect.
There's the car. Strike.
They approached the car.
Oh, please!
Found Anthony asleep.
Got his hands! Got his hands!
And that's where he was arrested.
Anthony Russell, you're under arrest for the murder of 3 people. You do not have to say anything but my army defence. You do not meant to question something which you later on court as. You do say maybe given evidence.
At 4:17 a.m. on Friday 30th of October, the man suspected of killing 3 people was taken to Pennybar Police Station in Birmingham.
He refused to be interviewed. He wouldn't leave his cell. So he was eventually asked the questions at his cell and he just put a blanket over his head and ignored all the questions and refused to make any comment.
Having caught their fugitive, the police would now need to use all their skills to link Russell to all 3 murders and make sure a suspected triple killer didn't escape justice. On Monday, the 2nd of November 2020, Anthony Russell appeared via video link from Birmingham Magistrates Court, charged with the murders of David Williams, Julie Williams, and Nicole McGregor. Nicole's unborn baby was too young to be classed as a victim.
He killed Julie, he killed David, he killed Nicola, but they didn't say he killed the baby because she wasn't born. I don't understand how that baby was not even classified as a body.
The violent robberies Russell had carried out whilst on the run were added to the list of offences.
The team that worked on it were brilliant. The real fear there is that you can find him within a week, but if you've not got the evidence to hand, he could be back out the door again. So it was really, really key that the team worked as hard as they did to make sure that they got that evidence.
Whilst Russell awaited trial, another charge was brought against him.
We also charged him with rape of Nicole because we found evidence that he'd had sexual intercourse with her. We knew that Nicole wouldn't have willingly gone with him to have sex, so we charged him with the rape.
In the lead up to trial, the Williams family suffered further heartbreak. For Julie's son, David's brother, Daniel, the loss was too great to bear.
Daniel didn't want to live without his mum or without his brother, which is why he decided to hang himself, which is heartbreaking to think that he's in that much pain that he thought that was the best outcome. As far as I'm concerned, Anthony Russell should be charged with Daniel's murder as well.
As the team prepared for the court case, investigators put together an account of that fateful week in October.
We did piece together some things from Anthony's associates and David's associates, and we realised that Anthony thought that David had slept with his girlfriend, so we think that was the motive for killing David.
It was all lies, but all this was going on Facebook saying Anthony Russell's looking for David because he's been seeing his girlfriend.
Police believe that Julie's murder was directly related to her son's.
Anthony's never really given us a full account as to exactly what happened, so we've never understood the real motives, but we think Julie reporting David missing was the potential motive for killing Julie.
Russell calculated that he couldn't keep up the charade of David having disappeared and decided in a cold-blooded, premeditated manner to kill David's mother, Julie.
The police said that Anthony Russell probably knocked on Julie's door because she wasn't shutting up and she weren't going away. My heart breaks thinking she's just been told that her son's dead and now you're next.
In the case of Nicole McGregor, the evidence suggested Russell had raped her, then killed her to cover his tracks. The team put together a case which the Crown Prosecution Service felt confident of winning.
It was really, really challenging because we're used to dealing with one murder, one crime scene, and suddenly we were finding murder, 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 scene, scene, scene.
The investigation gathered almost 9,000 hours of CCTV footage and put together a timeline which shone light on the message Julie had received from David about leaving town due to drug debts.
We believe that that text message had actually been sent by Anthony after David had been killed to Julie to try and put her off the scent of it being Anthony that had killed him.
It was 14 months after the murders before Anthony Russell was tried for his crimes. On the 14th of February 2022, his trial began at Warwick Crown Court.
Everyone was there, and it was before the jury was sworn in, so we were expecting quite a lengthy trial, but then he pleaded guilty on the first day. He pleaded guilty to everything apart from the rape.
That's not unusual, actually, because murdering somebody has some kind of machismo to it. You can hold your head up in the prison. When you get your sentence, you're much more likely to get sympathy because you can say, oh, I thought this and I thought that and I was being treated badly. He can't say anything like that about a rape.
So that left us with a decision then whether we were going to proceed just with the rape or not, and we decided we would try him for the rape.
Julie's sister went to the court every single day. I couldn't go because I kept thinking if I go and I see something, I won't be able to unsee it. The things she's seen in the photos she's seen and what she heard, that never came out in the papers. I think people would be very, very shocked if they'd known just how bad he was.
The jury heard the testimonies of those involved in the case.
The focus of the trial was whether or not Anthony Russell had raped Nicole prior to her death. The fact that she was found in a state of undress, the position in which her body was found, would suggest to me that she had been subject to a sexual assault.
Called to give evidence for the prosecution was Nicole's boyfriend, Chris, who'd searched for Nicole with the very man who'd killed her.
It was the first time he'd seen Anthony since Anthony had been with him. He was unable to give any evidence in a calm way because he reacted so badly to seeing Anthony in the courtroom. And that resulted in a jury failing to reach a verdict.
A new trial date was set for the following month, and on the 7th of March 2022, at Warwick Crown Court, Russell returned to face the charge of raping Nicole McGregor.
We ran exactly the same trial, and the second time round, I think because Chris had actually seen Anthony, he'd faced him, he was able to stand and give evidence. Chris's evidence was quite compelling.
When the jury came back, they found him guilty after only deliberating for 83 minutes of the rape of Nicole McGregor.
At his arrest and during the trial, Russell had remained relatively silent. When the time came for sentencing, he declined to leave his cell.
Russell is so uncooperative, he isn't even prepared to leave his jail cell to go to court to hear his sentence.
Got a whole life term, which means he will never ever be released, and that is reserved for the most serious of offenders. I think there's less than 100 people that have received that sort of sentence in the UK.
It was the result everyone had hoped for, but there was little cause for jubilation.
The families are the ones that are doing the sentence, not Russell. He's got the easy bit to do. But the people that have to live with what he's done is unbearable.
It's really difficult to feel any good feeling from it because it just is so horrific. But the only satisfaction you get is that he's in prison now. He won't come out and he won't hurt anybody else.
The bodies weren't released until after the court cases. David and Julie had a funeral together at the Hanley Crematorium, and they also had a picture of Daniel, and his ashes were there so that they could include the three of them. And we're all sat there, all looking at each other like everything's surreal, because you might see it on the television, you might read about it in the newspaper, but that doesn't happen to people like us, just ordinary people. If only Julie hadn't opened the door to Anthony Russell, if David had realised what an evil, evil person his friend was, you know, the story would be completely different.
Anthony Russell was a man who took what he wanted and gave nothing back in return. A man motivated only by serving his own needs, who terrified the elderly victims he brutalised and stole from, who subjected 3 people who trusted him to sadistic and tortuous murders. To this day, he's refused to explain or apologise for his actions, making Anthony Russell one of the world's most evil killers.